Hi, my name is Jason Jacobs, and I'd like to talk to you today about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, as we all know, can be described as the father of American freedom. At the age of 33, it was his pen that crafted the Declaration of Independence, and while serving as John Adams' vice president, he sought to prevent the trampling of First Amendment rights by opposing the Alien and Sedition Acts of President John Adams. While these are just two examples of Jefferson's commitment to freedom, there's an interesting duality in the Thomas Jefferson that we see as we look at his legacy. Freedom was a crucial part of Jefferson's career. That's evidenced by the language in the Declaration of Independence that declares all men as equal creations. But he himself was a slave owner. This apparent hypocrisy has been addressed vehemently as time has passed since the Revolution. One thing that I think we can draw from the duality expressed here was emphasized by Edmund S. Morgan in the text of his book, American Slavery, American Freedom. When talking about Thomas Jefferson, and by extension the other Republican Virginians of the Revolutionary Age, Morgan postulates that they hold freedom so dearly because they saw every day what life could be like without it. I'm personally inclined to believe in the idea that Jefferson was a product of his time and that slavery was accepted as an institution. Middlecoff points out in his text, The Glorious Cause, that in the wording of the Declaration of Independence, when looking at it in the context of institutional slavery, it shows that Thomas Jefferson had a belief that Africans were equals with whites in that they possessed a moral sense. This doesn't mitigate Jefferson's owning of slaves. It does provide perspective on how he can exercise an opinion within the confines of the contemporary institutions that he was a part of. In addition to that, there's an idea that's both positive and negative that's been attributed to Jefferson, and that's his belief that abolition could not come from the federal government as it was against the principles of the Revolution, and only that the consent of slave owners and large-scale emancipation from their end could end slavery in America. As a legacy, Jefferson's unwillingness or his inability to take responsibility for the enslavement of others through the clauses that he put forth in the Declaration of Independence, or acting directly as the President of the United States, created continued ambiguity in the relationship between those in power and to those in bondage. The Constitution of the United States, interesting, abolished only the slave trade, and it also wasn't immediately. It didn't take effect until 20 years after the Constitution was signed. And the abolishment of owning slaves would have to wait for another 3 generations and the Civil War. Thomas Jefferson, while he can be seen as the father of freedom, his influence can also be seen in more subtle ways throughout the country. After the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson used the Land Ordinance of 1785 that he helped write as the leader of that committee. He used that land ordinance to divide the Western Territory into 1 mile squares known as the Jeffersonian Grid that was utilized as a part of the public land survey system and is still used today as a standard for how to survey land from a distance. His commitment to education was shown in his drive for the founding of the University of Virginia in 1819, which ended up opening for students in 1825. I think it's almost impossible for anyone to deny the influence that Thomas Jefferson has had on the history of the United States. But his legacy is also very difficult to navigate, and his stand on slavery is one of the hardest aspects of his life to reconcile. I believe that Thomas Jefferson's legacy is more than just the Declaration of Independence that he crafted or his stance on slavery. But I also believe that the Declaration of Independence is the crowning achievement in his life for a man who embodied the Republican aesthetic of the Revolution. It's also important to note that any analysis of the duality that exists in Thomas Jefferson's life must be based on biblical ethics.